I met Rowan during my last fall semester at Mizzou. It was a crisp October Saturday, the kind that smells like barbecue smoke and dry leaves. I was tailgating with a few classmates when I noticed her across the lot, high boots, oversized sunglasses, and a confident kind of posture like she'd planned her entrance. She kept glancing over, then finally wandered our way, pretending to look for someone. She bumped into me, an awkward, overly rehearsed sort of move, and splashed half her drink down my front. My favorite jersey caught most of it. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she said, face flushing as she fumbled for napkins. I laughed it off, told her she owed me dinner. She blinked like she didn't expect that answer, then pulled out her phone and asked for my number before I could joke again. We had dinner the next night. She talked a lot about her internship at a marketing firm, about the magazine spreads she used to cut out as a teenager and tape to her bedroom walls. "I've always been obsessed with good taste," she said, stirring her coffee. "Not in a snobby way, just in a legacy way. My dad calls it stewardship. Her dad, I'd learn later, was Pastor Nathaniel Bennett of First Light Fellowship, a man who wore designer cufflinks under his robe and called people beloved, even while rebuking them. Rowan was different around me, softer almost. She liked that I worked weekends back home, hauling equipment and fixing fences. "It's raw," she said once, "gritty, like real American story kind of stuff." We started spending evenings in my truck, parked by the river, where she'd sketch house layouts on grid paper and ask me what kind of barn roof I preferred. I didn't know what to call what we had, but I liked how easy it felt. 2 years later, I proposed by that same river, kneeling in the dirt with a ring I'd saved for behind her back. She cried when she saw it, said I was everything solid she'd never had. At the time, I believed her. We got married the following spring under a weathered oak in the backfield of the farm. Rowan planned the whole thing herself. Vintage table settings, hand-lettered signs, floral arrangements that had to be flown in from somewhere I'd never heard of. It wasn't cheap, but I didn't care. She looked like she belonged in a magazine spread, and for a little while it felt like maybe we'd both stepped into the kind of life we used to daydream about in the truck. The farm needed more than dreams, though. I poured everything I had into rebuilding it, long days in the sun, long nights going over accounts and praying equipment wouldn't fail. I scraped together loans, reinvested every cent we earned. Within 3 years, I'd turned those 40 tired acres into something profitable again. Rowan used to call it our empire, though she rarely came out to the fields unless a photographer was involved. Instead, she focused on what she called the brand. She wanted a rustic lifestyle, but one that sparkled. That meant a 6-figure imported Andalusian horse that barely got ridden, only posed for photos in the golden hour. It meant custom-built barn doors that looked distressed but cost more than a used pickup. It meant replacing our truck every year because the new grill has cleaner lines. She filled the house with European antiques and soy candles from small batch companies in Vermont. "The right atmosphere makes all the difference," she told me, rearranging the same corner for the 3rd time that week. When I brought up starting a family, she smiled like I was sweet but slow. "Not yet. I'm not ready to ruin the aesthetic with diapers and Cheerios on the floor." She said it jokingly, but her eyes stayed sharp. I told myself it was timing, that she'd come around, that her nesting instincts just needed a little more time to wake up. But something about the way she managed our life like a showroom started making the walls feel tighter. Still, I kept going. I told myself that building something lasting took compromise, and maybe this was just the price of building it with her. Then Ivy texted. Said she needed to talk. Said it couldn't wait. Ivy's text came on a Tuesday afternoon. Called her. "I need to talk to you, alone. It's important." She was never one to dramatize. Rowan's best friend since high school, Ivy had always been the practical one, the type who patched her own jeans and fed strays behind the clinic. We weren't close, but there'd always been a quiet respect between us. She showed up just after sunset, hair still in a messy braid from work, dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept right in days. I offered coffee. She shook her head. "This won't take long," she said, and placed a thick folder on the table between us. "You need to see this." At first I thought it was a proposal, maybe a loan request. She'd mentioned wanting to start a small batch pet food company a few months back. But as soon as I opened the folder, my breath caught. Photos, screenshots, time-stamped texts, hotel bills, Rowan unmistakable in every frame, tangled up with Dr. Malcolm Dyer, the town vet, who'd once charged me $5,000 for colic treatment, then sent us a Christmas card signed, "With love, the Dyers." I flipped through the pages, trying to keep my hands from shaking. 8 months' worth of evidence. Trips, she said, were girls' weekends. Meetings, she claimed, were church events. Her in our driveway, kissing him beside his pickup. Him leaving our house at dawn while I was 3 states away buying a used combine. "I didn't know how to tell you," Ivy said. Her voice was low, steady. "I found out by accident at first. Then I started watching, gathering what I could." "Why now?" I asked. "Why me?" She hesitated, then said, "Rowan caught me taking screenshots at her place a few weeks ago. She said if I told anyone, she'd ruin me. She said her dad would make sure I never worked in this county again. She also told people I tried to sleep with Malcolm," she added. So either way, I figured I was already burning. Might as well light the whole damn match. I stared at the pages, the faces, the lies. I wasn't angry yet, just hollow, like someone had yanked the floor out from under me. And then I turned to the last page and saw the ultrasound. I don't know how long I sat there staring at the ultrasound photo, but the kitchen clock had ticked through 2 full hours before I started flipping back through the folder. That's when I noticed the tabs. Ivy had labeled everything, dates, locations, even a section marked family threads. I opened it, expecting more texts between Rowan and Malcolm. Instead, it was messages between her and her parents. The first one was from Serena. "Don't panic. Your father and I will handle it. He's worked too hard to let a personal misstep damage the ministry." Another from Pastor Bennett. "Let Calder believe the child is his. For now. When the time is right, we'll revisit the situation. Malcolm just needs to be discreet." Every word landed like a stone to the chest. These were the same people who'd stood beside us at the altar, who'd prayed over our union, who hosted Sunday dinners with clasped hands and careful smiles, who called me son. I kept reading. "Rowan, I think I'm showing. He's going to start asking questions. Serena, wear looser clothes. Distract him. You'll thank us one day for sparing you public shame." There was no grief in their messages, no remorse, just strategy, image management, a full-blown campaign to protect their name, their church, their spotless public persona. And I was supposed to be the unwitting stand-in, the placeholder husband, the good man who worked himself to the bone while his wife carried another man's child and smiled across the dinner table like nothing was wrong. I closed the folder slowly and leaned back in the chair, listening to the silence of my own house. Our house. I thought about every meal I'd eaten under their roof, every sermon I'd nodded through, every time Serena had asked when we were giving her a grandchild. They hadn't just let it happen. They'd orchestrated it. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even curse. Instead, I stood up, locked the folder in the fireproof safe in the hallway, and pulled my phone from my pocket. It was time to make a call. The next morning, I told Rowan I had to check a field near the south fence line. I drove 40 miles in the opposite direction and parked outside a Starbucks in the next county, far enough from anyone who might recognize my truck. I sat in the lot and dialed a number I'd found the night before. Marcus Hale, family law attorney, discreet and well-reviewed 3 counties over. He answered on the second ring. I didn't waste time with small talk, just told him the basics: adultery, paternity fraud, financial deception. He asked if I had proof. I told him I had enough to bury a small town. He said that would do just fine. I spent the next week smiling through my days like nothing had changed. I woke up before dawn, fed the horses, checked irrigation, ordered parts, and kissed Rowan goodbye with the same practiced rhythm. She didn't notice the shift. She was too busy making Thanksgiving plans, talking about catering options and floral centerpieces. Every time she laughed at something on her phone, I wondered if she was texting him. At night, I sat at the kitchen table going through statements, matching charges to hotel dates, flagging cash withdrawals I hadn't made, jewelry purchases I'd never seen. I made copies of everything, stored them in the safe with the folder. Marcus said our state didn't do community property and that the farm purchased before marriage was safe. But I wasn't taking chances. I opened new accounts, moved money gradually, just enough to stay quiet, just enough to protect what I'd built. I wasn't just hurt, I was underestimated. They'd assumed I'd rage, crumble, maybe run. But I'd grown up watching animals die in winter and crops rot in rain. When something broke on the farm, you didn't cry about it. You rolled up your sleeves and fixed what you could. And when it couldn't be fixed, you planned the burn and planted again. I waited until she was asleep one night and texted Ivy, asked if she could meet. I had something to give her. Thanksgiving was always the same in Eureka. First Light Fellowship held its annual harvest service packed to the rafters, with every family in town dressed like a catalog page, corduroy-polished boots, and too tight smiles. Afterward, the inner circle, those closest to Pastor Bennett, were invited to dinner at the Bennett home. It was a performance disguised as gratitude. This year, I made sure it would be unforgettable. 3 days before I finalized the delivery with Marcus. The process server, a quiet man named Derek, was scheduled to arrive at 2:00 p.m. right as Pastor Bennett would be carving the turkey and sermonizing about blessings. Multiple envelopes, one for Rowan, one for her parents, all full of carefully ordered truth. That same afternoon, I met Ivy at a roadside diner 2 towns over. She looked tired but lighter than before. I slid an envelope across the table, half of the investment she'd once asked for. "You don't owe me anything," she said, glancing at the check. I shook my head. "I don't pay for revenge. I repay courage." She tucked the envelope into her bag without a word. Before she left, she paused and added, "Be careful tomorrow." People like them, they don't just fall quiet. They spin. "I'm counting on it," I said. That night, I packed a small duffel and stashed it under the back seat of my truck. Clothes, a few essentials, copies of the paperwork. I booked a motel an hour away, the kind with flickering signs and stale air. I shifted the last bit of money out of our shared account, not enough to make noise, just enough to leave her with nothing she hadn't earned. Rowan spent the evening baking pies and fussing over her dress. She asked me to pick up flowers in the morning, and I agreed without hesitation. She thought she was staging a holiday, but I was staging a reckoning. Thanksgiving morning, Rowan took nearly 2 hours to get ready. Hair curled just right, lipstick that matched her earrings, a new emerald green dress fitted to show just enough of the bump to draw attention, but not questions. I wore my best suit and said all the right things, told her she looked beautiful, told her the pie smelled amazing, told her I was proud of the life we'd built. Every word was practiced, every smile rehearsed. The church service was as theatrical as ever. Pastor Bennett delivered a booming sermon on gratitude, legacy, and the sacred bonds of family. He looked right at me when he said, "There is no hiding from God's truth. Not in the home, not in the heart." I kept a straight face. I even shook his hand afterward, told him the message hit home. By 1:00, the Bennett house was full. Church elders, cousins from out of state. Serena fluttered around, complimenting everyone's outfits and pretending not to hover near Rowan. Malcolm arrived with Claire. Their coats matched. Her smile didn't. At 1:58, I got the text, "In position. 2 minutes." Everyone was seated. The turkey was in front of Pastor Bennett, knife-poised voice rising for a final prayer. "May this home be a place of honesty, of peace, of righteousness." The doorbell rang. He hesitated, then nodded to Serena. "Let me get it." The hallway was quiet for a beat too long. Then I heard Derek's voice, calm, clear. "Delivery for Rebecca Langford, and for Nathaniel and Serena Bennett." Gasps started before the envelopes even hit their hands. Rowan stood frozen as she read the first page. Her lips moved silently over the words. I stood. Since there's so much talk of truth today, I brought some. I pulled out my phone, pressed play. Rowan and Malcolm, outside a hotel, kissing in the parking lot. Date and time stamped 2 months ago when she told me she was at a church retreat. The room dropped into silence, broken only by Claire's sharp inhale. Rowan turned to me, face drained. But I wasn't done yet. Claire was the first to break the silence. Her chair scraped backward as she stood, face-pale hands clenched at her sides. "What baby?" she said, eyes locked on Malcolm. He stammered something useless, eyes flicking between me and Rowan like a man dropped into a flood without knowing which way was up. Claire didn't wait. She grabbed a ceramic serving dish stuffing, I think, and hurled it straight at his head. It missed, barely, shattered against the wall behind him. Someone screamed. Someone else dropped their glass. Pastor Bennett stepped forward, trying to contain it. "This is inappropriate," he said, voice stiff with command. "This is a family gathering. This isn't the time." I turned to him calmly. "Page 12, I said. "That's the one where you told Rowan to let me believe the child was mine. When the time is right, we'll revisit the situation. Those were your words, weren't they, Pastor?" He didn't respond, just looked down at the envelope like it might somehow catch fire and erase everything it contained. Serena sat motionless, lips pressed into a line, one hand gripping the edge of the table like she might collapse if she let go. Across the room, I caught Ivy's eye. She was filming just like I'd asked. Not to share, just to protect the truth when the spin started. I looked at Rowan one last time. Her eyes were wide mouth, slightly open, blinking like she didn't recognize the world anymore. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel rage. I just felt done. "You wanted secrets," I said quietly. "Now no one has any." Then I turned, walked out the door, and didn't look back. I could hear Claire screaming behind me. Pastor Bennett calling for order. Serena crying. Chairs scraping, voices rising. Someone knocked something over. Glass shattered. I kept walking. By the time I reached my truck, the cool air had wiped the heat from my face. I got in, closed the door, and drove. No music, no calls. I didn't check my phone until I was halfway to the motel, and when I did, there were already 12 missed calls. I parked behind the motel, took the side entrance, and checked in under a name that wasn't mine. The room smelled like old cigarettes and lemon cleaner, but it was quiet. No curated lighting, no antique furniture, just a bed, a lamp, and a lock that worked. I turned off my phone before I even set down my bag. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was earned. When I powered it back on an hour later, the screen lit up with a flood of missed calls and voicemails. Rowan, Pastor Bennett, Serena, a few unknown numbers I didn't bother with. The messages ranged from hysterical apologies to veiled threats. One from Serena said I'd damaged something sacred. One from Rowan just said, "Please call me. Please." I didn't respond. Then Ivy's name popped up. Just one text. "Best Thanksgiving I've ever had." I stared at it for a long moment, then typed back, "Check your account." A few seconds later, the read receipt flashed. Then nothing. I pulled off my boots, sat on the edge of the bed, and looked around the bare room. For the first time in months, my chest didn't feel like it was carrying something it couldn't put down. I wasn't gripping my jaw. My shoulders weren't tense. My thoughts weren't spinning through lies. I lay back, stared at the ceiling, and let the quiet settle around me. By morning, I'd have a new plan. But tonight, I'd sleep. 2 weeks later, I met with a real estate agent named Rick, who specialized in rural properties. He walked the land with a practiced eye, ran the numbers, and surprised me with the estimate. "Market's hot," he said. "Developers are sniffing around. You're sitting on gold." I listed the farm that afternoon. The offer came in 3 days later, 30% over asking. I didn't even negotiate. I just signed the paperwork, scanned it back, and watched the digital confirmation land in my inbox like a quiet exhale. Rowan, according to Marcus, would walk away with almost nothing. The prenup might have been flimsy, but the paper trail wasn't. Hotel receipts paid from joint accounts. Jewelry she couldn't account for. A pregnancy test she never meant for me to see. The judge would see what he needed to. And the paternity test there was no question left after that. She stopped calling. Her father didn't. His messages turned from fire to pleading, then finally silence. I wired the second half of Ivy's startup money that Friday. She replied with a photo of her first production run, plain white bags with clean black lettering. Grain Honest Pet Company. She said she'd name a recipe after me. I told her not to. Instead, I packed up what little I was taking, left the rest behind, and pointed the truck west. I'd found a place in Colorado, better water rights, more space, no memories hanging off the porch beams. I didn't need to outrun anything, I just needed clean dirt. Some things grow better after a controlled burn.